Hello everyone, this is the CircuitPython weekly meeting for Monday, March 3rd, 2025. This is the time of the week where we get together to talk about all things CircuitPython. I'm Dan and I'm sponsored by Adafruit to work on CircuitPython. CircuitPython is a version of Python designed to run on tiny computers called microcontrollers. CircuitPython development is primarily sponsored by Adafruit, so if you want to support Adafruit and CircuitPython, consider purchasing hardware from Adafruit.com. We host this meeting on the Adafruit Discord server. You can join anytime by going to adafru.it/discord, where you'll find a Discord invitation. We hold the meeting in the CircuitPython dev text channel and the CircuitPython voice channel. This meeting usually happens on Mondays at 2 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, which is 11 a.m. U.S. Pacific Time, except on U.S. Monday holidays when we move the meeting to Tuesday. In the notes doc, there's a link to a calendar that you can view online or add to your favorite calendar app. We also send notifications about upcoming meetings via Discord. If you would like to receive these notifications, ask us to add you to this @CircuitPythonistas Discord role. There's a shared notes document, which right now is in Google Docs, that accompanies the meeting and recording. You can contribute to that document beforehand. The final notes document includes timestamps to go along with the video, so you can use the document to skip around and view the parts of the video that interest you most. The meeting tends to run 30 to 60 minutes. After each meeting, we post a link for the next meeting's notes document to the CircuitPython dev channel in the Adafruit Discord and pin that to the pinned messages. So check the pinned messages to find the latest notes doc so you can add your notes for the next meeting. If you want to participate but cannot attend, you can leave hug reports and status updates in the document for us to read during the meeting. This meeting is held in 5 parts. I'll go over those parts as we get to them. So with that, we'll start with the first part, which is community news, and I'll take as timestamp for that. So community news comes from our weekly Python for Microcontrollers newsletter, which Anne so ably edits, and it goes out via email on Monday mornings. You can visit adafruitdaily.com to subscribe to the newsletter. We just hit exactly 12,000 subscribers to the newsletter, which is a wonderful milestone. Every week we add a couple dozen people, so keep sending us information for the newsletter, and I'll go over how you can do that at the end. So this week we don't have any specifically CircuitPython news, but we have 3 interesting news items. The first is about resources for learning about embedded systems, programming, and hardware and the like. There's a link to a page on the Embedded Artistry website, which has a wonderful collection of pointers to resources for learning about embedded systems. So take a look at that link. The next item is about Claude 3.7, Sonnet, and Claude Code. Claude is a large language model AI system. It seems to be quite good at doing coding. I'll just read. It shows strong improvements in coding and front-end web development. Along with the model, Anthropic, that's the developer of this model, also introduced a command line tool for agentic coding, Claude Code. Claude Code is available as a limited research preview and enables developers to delegate substantial engineering tasks to Claude directly from their terminal. Some examples: there's a Reddit post about how someone took a 27-year-old Visual Basic exe file and it was reverse engineered by Claude and rewritten in Python. And also, Lady Ada Lamore has been using Claude 3.7 and feeding it data sheets and existing examples of drivers for various hardware devices and having it write Python drivers. And it's been quite successful at that. It saves a lot of boilerplate code. Many hardware devices have many, for instance, opcodes and the like of that, and it does a great job of doing a lot of the sort of boring work of getting the driver started. So we've found success with it. And our final item is a note that the Magpie magazine is now the Raspberry Pi official magazine. The Raspberry magazine, which now includes Hackspace magazine, has been reborn as the Raspberry Pi official magazine. They have a special offer currently. Get 3 issues for 10 UK pounds. Issue 151 is out, and there's a link in the notes document and in Discord if you'd like to look at more details. So, as I mentioned, this news comes from the Python on Microcontrollers weekly newsletter. You can find the archives at adafruitdaily.com. It highlights the latest Python and hardware-related news from around the web, including CircuitPython, Python, and MicroPython developments. To contribute your own news or project, you can do a bunch of things. You can edit next week's draft on GitHub. There's a link in the notes. And submit a pull request. You can email cpnews@adafruit.com with information and links, or you can tag a post with hashtag CircuitPython on Mastodon, Blue Sky, or X, and we'll take a look at all those things. And we really welcome your suggestions. The newsletter is much better for your suggestions. There's all kinds of interesting stuff out in there. All right, well, that concludes the community news section, and now we'll go on to the next major section, which is the state of CircuitPython, the libraries, and Blinka. This section is a quantitative overview of the entire project. It gives us a chance to look at the health of the project separate from our status updates. We'll talk about the project overall and then separately discuss the core, libraries, and Blinka. First are up. Overall, in the past week, there were 64 pull requests merged out of 11 authors. Some authors one author I haven't seen before, or 2, is Flummer, and also Samantez Fox, I believe is new or relatively new. Those 64 pull requests were reviewed by 6 reviewers. And overall, there were 5 issues closed by 4 people and 8 opened by 8 people. Next up is our section about the CircuitPython core. And Scott, are you available to read that?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Dan. Okay, so we had 14 pull requests merged to the core. This is the C language core that runs CircuitPython on embedded firmware devices, on microcontrollers. We had 8 different authors, new or infrequent folks, Flummer, Sean the IT guy, Samantha's Fox, and Neradoc. So thanks to those infrequent folks. Retired Wizard is also infrequent. Thank you. We had 3 reviewers, Dan, Jeff, and myself. We had 22 open pull requests, so we're comfortably under the 25 goal of keeping them all on a single page. Most of those are actually like on the older side, so always take a look at the things that have languished a bit. Issues-wise, we had 3 closed issues by 2 people and 2 open by 2 people, so we're net down 1. Pretty stable, which is always good. For a total of 768 open issues. We prioritize issue-related work for Adafruit-funded folks using the milestone system. That is, say if you find an issue that you'd like to work on and it's marked long-term, feel free to pick it up, and we're happy to support you in doing that work. It just means that Adafruit folks probably won't do it anytime soon. The things that are higher up on our radar is we have 18 open issues for 10.0 and 12 open issues for 9.2. So plenty of stuff to do there. And that's it for the core.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Next up is the library section, and Tim will tell us about that.
All right. Thanks, Dan. This section covers all of the CircuitPython libraries. We have those split into 2 different bundles, the Adafruit bundle and the community bundle. Right now we have 354 libraries in the Adafruit bundle and 154 in the community bundle, which gives us a total of 508. For the Adafruit bundle, all of these libraries are found on GitHub under names like Adafruit_CircuitPython_ and then the name of whatever library it is. And these tend to be either driver libraries that help you interface with some particular breakout board or piece of hardware, or helper libraries that allow you to create your project code at a bit of a higher level without worrying about some of the lower level details of networking or displays or other various bits. Across all of those libraries this week, we had 49 pull requests merged, which is quite high. We did a couple of different sweeps, which I will talk about more in a little bit. For those 49 pull requests, we had 3 authors. So our authors this week, myself, Justin, and Dan. We had 5 reviewers, thanks to Brent, Scott, myself, Dan, and Justin as well for doing reviews this week. We had a lot of them, so definitely appreciate help from everyone. So because we did basically a couple of different sweeps over the libraries, pretty much all of our pull requests this week were on the newer side, with the oldest ones just being 3 days old and the several of the newest ones just being down at 1 day. That leaves us at the end of the week, after the week, I should say, with 51 pull requests remaining open. The oldest one of those is a draft that is getting up there at 928 days, and the newest one is listed as 3 days old. In terms of issues for the last week, we had 2 issues closed by 2 people, with 4 new issues opened up by 4 people. That leaves us with 694 open issues across all the libraries, and there are 3 of those currently that are labeled as good first issues, which you can find those as well as all the rest listed out at circuitpython.org/contributing, which is the website where you should head if you are interested in getting involved in CircuitPython on the Python side of stuff. On that page, again, circuitpython.org/contributing, the first thing you'll see when you load that up is a big list of open PRs, links over to GitHub, and these are essentially proposed changes in the library, and they're waiting for a person to come along and review that change. So if you would like to do that, the way you would do is just look through that list on circuitpython.org/contributing, find one of those PR links that's either to a piece of hardware that you know about, or you have the hardware for, or you know about the library or the sensor or anything like that. You can click through to GitHub, take a look at the code that's there, review it for spelling, syntax, logic, anything and everything really. Leave a comment there on GitHub letting us know what you found when you looked over the code. If you do happen to have the hardware for that particular PR, also go ahead and try it out on hardware and let us know in your comment how it went when you ran it. If you get comfortable with that process and you would like to continue doing stuff like that, we can get you leveled up to leave official reviews there on GitHub as well, although the comments honestly are just as helpful. If you want to start getting your hands dirty with some of your own code rather than reviewing, again on that page, circuitpython.org/contributing, near the top there's a couple navigation links, and if you click over to the issues side of that page, what you'll find is a similar list of links to GitHub, but these ones represent issues. They don't have a proposed change yet. They're actually waiting for a person to come along who's interested in working on whatever the change may be, maybe a bug fix or a new feature or enhancement or something like that. If you would like to work on that, it's a similar process. You can click through to GitHub, but this time you'll be submitting your own PR instead of looking over someone else's work. We have a guide in the Learn system for contributing to CircuitPython in the libraries using Git and GitHub. And we also have folks who are around throughout the week on Discord. So if you would like to contribute, no matter whether that's reviewing or contributing your own code, submitting your own PR, and you're having trouble with any part of the process, check out the guide, first of all, and then come say hi on Discord. Let us know what you're up to. Let us know what trouble you're having. And there will be folks who are more than happy to help you out. We want everyone to be able to contribute, no matter what your background or skill level or prior experience is. So we're always happy to help get folks involved. Yeah, and then updated libraries are here in the note stock, Qualia, Adafruit.io, WSGI, and Turtle, although that does skip some of the others from the sweep as well. But that's what we've got for libraries this week. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Next up is our section about Blinka. Take a timestamp here. Blinka is our compatibility layer for CircuitPython on single-board computers like Raspberry Pi. So Blinka code runs in regular Python, but it executes code that looks like CircuitPython, and CircuitPython features are emulated in the Blinka by the Blinka library. So over the past week, there was 1 pull request merged, 1 author, and 1 reviewer. Thanks, Jeff and Tim. There are 21 open pull requests. Some are old, a few are newer. There were 0 issues closed by 0 people and 2 opened by 2 people, and there are 150 open issues now pertaining to the Blinka project. And right now there are 146 supported single-board computers that are supported by Blinka, which is great. Okay, our next major section is Hug Reports. Hug Reports is a chance to highlight folks in the CircuitPython community and beyond for doing awesome things. So I'll start, and we'll go down the list of Hug Reports alphabetically. If you are text only or are missing the meeting, I'll read your notes when I get to them in the list. So first, me. And I like to thank ADCC, who's done a lot of bug sleuthing recently about DMA, flash writes, and a bunch of other stuff. It's really down in the weeds, but it's very important because we have some hard head-scratching bugs at the moment. And also thanks to Retired Wizard, who's been improving the CircuitPython terminal experience with things like terminal color codes and things like that. It sounds great. Next up is C. Grover. I'll read their contribution. Thanks to Paul Cutler for the invitation and to Todd Bott for joining me on an upcoming CircuitPython show podcast where we talk about creating libraries for the community bundle. And next up now is Tim, Foamy Guy.
All right. Thank you, Dan. My Hug Reports this week, thanks to Jeff for the new XVFB example for POMatter, which lets you mirror X-based graphical programs to the RGB matrices on the Pi 5. That's really super cool to play with, and I appreciate Jeff taking some time to whip that up. Thanks to Tyeth for watching along with my stream over the weekend and offering up some good ideas on ways to improve what I was working on. Thanks to Retired Wizard, echoing what Dan said, for implementing some VT100 terminal color escape sequences, as well as a couple of other improvements I've seen in PRs to the terminal as well. I think that's super cool stuff. And finally, for me, thanks to Scott for feedback on my first attempt at the inverted color support and talking through a different approach to it with me. Appreciate it. And that's what I've got. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Tim. And next up is Jeff.
Hello. I've got one big thank you to Scott for continued work on a pull request in Pico PIO USB. Even though that's actually got all the stuff that CircuitPython needed even a week ago, he added something else on for me and is going to continue working to get that merged. So thank you very much for that. And as Tim was talking, I realized I needed to thank him because I made a quick example and he's turned it into a documented and useful example. So that is much better for the people out there in the world who would like to make use of this. And that's what I've got.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. And next up, we've got Justin. If you
just wanted to hug out to Dan, Tim, and Tyeth for reviewing 33 of PRs for removing secrets. 30 of them are merged in, and just a few more to try to figure out what to do with.
Okay, thank you. And next, Scott.
Hello, Hugged Attack again for more Tiny USB improvements for the Fruit Jam. They sent some changes last night that should get the 8-bit do controllers going, which will be exciting, and I'm excited to test that. Also, a hug to Tim and Retired Wizard for improving terminal support and CircuitPython. And then also Cup Nooble on itch for the Sproutlands asset packs. I dropped a link there, but using those in my Chime Garden game, which has been great.
Okay. And finally, Tyeth has a contribution, and I'll read theirs. Hug to Justin for tackling lots of networking and secrets things, but mostly for working on Adafruit CircuitPython JSON stream to help save that RAM. Yep, that was another great project that went on recently. Hug to Tim, Foamy Guy, for always putting out those weekend streams. It's nice to be able to see live game dev and how semi-recent and bleeding edge changes in CircuitPython can be utilized. And that's it for Hug Reports. Next up, we've got status updates. This is our time to tell folks what we've been working on individually. I will start, and we'll go through the list alphabetically as before. When I call on you, take a couple of minutes to talk about what you've been doing since the last meeting and what you'll be doing until the next meeting. So I'll start, as I said, and I've been continuing for the past couple of weeks to be working on updating the Nina FW firmware, which is used on Airlift coprocessors. Right now, those are ESP32 modules that we use either as a breakout board or incorporated onto boards such as the Pi portal or the Matrix portal. And we want to update it from ESP IDF 3, which is completely outdated, to 5 something. And also improve, maybe get some bug fixes in there and stuff. So I started tackling that, and I started originally working on a bunch of the library code that was in Nina FW. It turns out that I could actually just discard most of that and use the latest libraries in the ESP32 Arduino board support package, which is what you use with Arduino IDE, and it has almost all the functionality that I want. So I was able to discard a lot of code from Nina FW and just get it down to the bare protocol stuff. So it takes commands over SPI, does a Wi-Fi stuff, and sends back results back on SPI to the sort of the host microcontroller that is talking to the Airlift coprocessor. And also, in the past week, I reviewed a bunch of Justin's secrets.py PRs and then kind of handed that over to Tim. So I can continue working full-time on the Nina FW stuff. And next up is Anne. I'll read theirs. Making a CircuitPython breakout game for Metro RP2350 with USB host keyboard input and DVI video via HSTX output. A Learn Guide is coming this week. So we've got 3 important acronyms there. And it's really neat what's going on there. I've seen pictures of this. So watch it for that Learn Guide. Next up is ADCC.
Thank you, Dan. I'm deep into a very interesting issue involving RP2350 Flash and HSTX TDMS, to throw a couple more acronyms at us. The challenge is to keep DVI video running while not corrupting concurrent flash writes or crashing. That's it.
All right, thank you. All right, and next up we've got Tim again.
All right, thanks. Last week, the round display Compass Project Learn Guide and video, I finished those up and they were published last week. I also updated the screenshot utility, which gets used in Learn Guide pages typically to show PNG and JPEG files. Those were not actually getting shown in the screenshots because they weren't supported at the time that thing was created, but we have support now in image load, which is super cool, and those will get shown now in Learn Guide screenshots as well. And I also made it always show the settings.toml file since we create that by default these days. I wrote code for a flight radar example that goes on the round display as well. This one pulls data from OpenSky Network and it plots the planes onto the round display in the style like an old green radar with circles and a sweeping arm, which is kind of cool. There will eventually be a Learn Guide for that, but I'm getting back into matrix panels and some other stuff, so I'll circle back to it. But the code is there at this point. I took a shot at supporting inverted colors in the terminal and talked to Scott with a little bit about a different approach. So I will take my next attempt at that in the next couple of days or so. And then the bulk of my work has been on Pi 5 with the RGB matrix stuff. I tested the new XVFB example with Chocolate Doom and a couple of other programs. And then I started researching how to inject key events into the app running inside that virtual screen. By default, XVFB doesn't handle keyboard events. What I came up with was a separate tool called XDO tool. And then inside the Python code, I'm listening and reading raw inputs from the keyboard and then converting those to the names that XDO tool likes and then kind of sending them into that virtual window. It has been fairly tedious and it took me a bit to get it figured out, but once I did figure out how to do it, it's just been kind of the tedium of mapping the different names and stuff, and it's been working out pretty well. Although I will say I will never again will I take for granted how much gets magically taken care of when you press an arrow key or a control key or the escape key on the keyboard, because it turns out quite a bit gets taken care of. So yeah, that's what I have been up to. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Tim. Yeah, it's also amazing how many different numeric codes there are for different things. ASCII and keyboard codes, and yet other stuff. All right. Next up is Jeff.
Hi again. So I've continued helping out with Scott's pull request in Pico PIUSB pull, by testing, and I also fixed a bug regarding switching from the full speed to the low speed bit rate that affected just overclocked RP2350s. And belated hug report, that would have been impossible without Scott running a test UF2 that I sent him and looking at it in his fancy protocol tracer. Anyway, that's now all working for me, so I'm really excited about that. Yeah, I did do a little bit of work directly in CircuitPython. I added a typing shorthand for several things. There's the any type of display type shortcut, the any type of frame buffer, and the any type of display bus. And I added that because in the documentation there was a spot where I wanted to refer to any kind of display. Most of my work has been on the MCU-ME emulator for the RP2350 with a focus on the Fruit Jam, as David mentioned earlier. So with that, I've got the Commodore 64 emulator working, and I'm able to play a simple open source game. So that was really exciting. And then the last thing is, I've been talking about this on a number of occasions, but at the end of the month, I'm wrapping up my Adafruit work, and I'm going to take a big trip in Europe. If you are a person who is in Europe, or you have opinions about Europe because you visited, I have a city list, and I'd love to hear any travel tips you have about those cities or places that are a day trip away from those cities. So send me a DM if you want about that. And that's what I'm working on.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And now we've got Justin.
Yeah, over the last 2 weeks, I've been decided to go take a stab at removing all of the old usage of secrets since we've switched over to settings.toml as a safer ability to make sure we're not committing code in. So on the 21st when I started, just some quick stats, secrets.py was listed in 115 files. The word secret itself was in 134 with over 1,000 results. As of the 28th, we still have 3 open PRs, but secrets.py is now in 16 files. A big one of that is mini MQTT, which hopefully will get merged in this week. And secrets itself as a word is only in 28 files. So just plugging away on that and getting all those removed. And so we can have kind of cleaner examples, and that most of them, when copied out and things like that, will now be similar for users and less struggles when helping people.
Okay, thank you. And last on our status list is Scott.
Hello. Okay, so for me, lots of logistics stuff. So I'm out this Friday because the kiddo doesn't have daycare. And then next Tuesday, we fly to Tokyo for 10 days. So I'll be back to work on the 24th. And then also after that, I'm actually here for only 5 weeks before I go on paternity leave again. So just really thinking about what the highest priorities for this limited amount of time I have is. So I'm working this week. I really want to get all of the USB host fixes checked in. Tax got more changes to TinyUSB to test today, but I want to get as much of that checked in so that folks can use it rather than just using these random branches. That's my highest priority this week. And then when I have some time not doing that, I'm working on adding a saves partition to the Fruit Jam, but it'll generally be, I think, just a board configurable thing where if you do erase file system, or we're creating a new file system, we'll create 2 instead of 1. And the intent of this is that the second one, the saves partition, will be able to write from CircuitPython even if the CircuitPy drive is writable from USB. And then around that, I want to experiment with having an onboard code editor for the Fruit Jam. So that's this week for me.
Okay, thank you, Scott. So that's it for status updates, and our final section is in the weeds. This is where we discuss, have longer form discussions about things that either came out of status updates or people thought needed some discussion among the folks who attend this meeting. So if you have some ideas about in the weeds stuff, bring it up. try to put it in the notes beforehand, and then we can go over it. So first of all, I've got Tim, and go ahead, Tim, with your questions about CPython versions.
Yeah, so this came to my attention over the weekend, but my overall kind of question is, do we want to, and if so, like to which version would we want to raise the minimum supported version of Blinka as well as CircuitPython typing? Currently, I have links here in the notes doc if anyone's interested in where those are found, but currently I believe Blinka is at 3.7, so you have to be 3.7 or greater, and then CircuitPython is at 3.8 or greater, which actually does not exactly conflict, but cause issues for people with 3.7. Somebody with 3.7 on a Raspberry Pi came to the help with channel over the weekend, and they were trying to use a sensor or something like that with some basic code, and it was not working. And the exception was ultimately because the syntax inside CircuitPython typing was unsupported on their version of Python, which was 3.7. I believe, at least that's the root cause that they were having. So that got me thinking about updating that to a newer version. Both 3.7 and 3.8 are end of life at this point. So I think it would definitely make sense to update both of those. The good news is the libraries themselves don't actually have anything listed. They're just listed as Python 3, so there's not anything to do on the library front. If we want to do this, it would just be the Blinka repos and the typing, and we could potentially even update it to do kind of the same thing as the libraries, where we just do Python 3 and it's always the latest one, but we could choose a specific version as well as if we wanted as well. Jeff asked how that came to my attention. Yeah, the user in help with was the first way this came to my attention, but yeah, coincidentally the same day we were also talking about some of this TOML stuff, which Justin will bring up next, and I think that does kind of tie in to this conversation as well, because one of the solutions we were talking about with TOML, it depends on a module that was at one point brought into the core of Python. So people below a certain version of Python, they will need for TOML, they would need to install this library in order to read like settings TOML, for instance. But for people after a certain version of Python, it's built in and they don't need to install the library. Although I think maybe the import name changed or something, and I don't know off the top of my head what that version is. Jeff mentions here, I'll read out my opinion, no reason to support such old versions. Debian Bullseye, which is now Old Stable, was released in 2021 with Python 3.9. Python 3.9 is currently the oldest version supported by Python.org. Raspberry Pi OS releases since 2021 December, so almost 2022, have been based on Debian 11 with Python 3.9. So either 3.9 we could update it to so that we support the Old Stable from December 2021, or 3.11 we could update it to, which supports installs from October 2023. So that would get us much newer. And I do think Python 3.11 is what's loaded by default on the Pi images. I just imaged one recently and got 3.11. Yeah, I think that is everything. So yeah, again, the kind of core question is, do we want to update those minimum Python requirements for Blinka and typing? And then if so, do we want to move to a specific version like 3.9 or 3.11, or do we want to try to go with just Python 3 like we have in the libraries? And I do... well,
it would be nice if a user...
Good to talk with her as well.
Yeah, talking to Melissa is a great idea. It would be nice if a user got a clear error that said your Python version isn't supported. But if this user that you talked to was using 3.7 and the CircuitPython typing library correctly declares that it requires 3.8, and I don't know if it does, then they should have gotten an error, but they must not have gotten that error, or they chose to bypass it. So I'm curious about that. But if there's something we can do that will give a clear error when we know it's not supported, like listing a minimum version, I think that's better than just saying 3. Because then that would, install back on 3.0, and nobody expects that to work.
Right, yes.
And Justin says many people miss pip errors, and I think that's probably very true, because pip will print a lot of things sometimes, and it's not the person's fault.
Yeah, That's a good question though about the install. Now that you mention it, I'm not sure how they would have ended up with typing installed. I mean, they must have had typing installed. They posted a picture of their stack trace, which went through CircuitPython typing, so somehow they managed to get it. But
there's an older version of typing which does work. I mean, because pip will pick the highest version that works,
Right.
that matches. But
Okay.
and the other
that's
problem is that
another-
there was a bad version for a while that used a certain feature that was not available in the version that was declared. And I yanked that version
That's-
from PyPy, but a lot of people installed it at that time. So I think that might have just been the problem. I think I've helped like 3 or 4 people who had that particular problem.
I gotcha. Okay, that could be something. And then if they would have tried to go and install the new one, it would have not worked since they.
That's
were already
right.
on
So
it.
I tell them like uninstall and install. It was like something 02, and either you need 01 or 03. So,
Okay.
but a lot of
Yeah,
people
this-
ended up installing. 02 was the version for many months.
Okay. This user, we pointed them towards just try the new Raspberry Pi OS if you can, and they said they didn't have anything important on their SD card, so they were going to try it. I don't think they ever did come back and let us know. But I'm taking the no news is good news relatively on that front. So
Sounds
as
good.
best as I know, that worked for them.
Yeah, so I'd say I mean I think it's good to give a specific version, but 3.9. There was NVIDIA Jetsons were at 3.7 for a long time, but they had so many problems anyway. I think they may have finally updated.
Yeah.
And Melissa would certainly know the lore, the oral history about which versions are worth supporting.
I will lean towards maybe 3.9 then, and I will drop a message in the chat here after we're done to ping Melissa and ask her about it as well, or maybe open an issue, or that way I can link to there, and there's a central place where all this is at, so we're not losing it in the chat. That's probably what I'll do.
All right.
Cool.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Next up, we've got Justin, who's got a couple of different things to ask about.
Yeah, and I'll go backwards since we are already talking about Blinka. So my thing came up from, so Tim brought up some learn guides, and so some of the comments and some of the examples just say like, oh, make sure to set your environment. We could make things more standard by adding support for TOML, which will read the settings.toml file just fine. And so the question is, do we want to do that? If we're going to update Blinka to 3.9, we could also include the Tombow library, and that way that's installed when people install Blinka, and then that works. So it's kind of a question of does that make sense to do that, to update examples, to just load the Tombow file so those environment variables are set versus having people set them. And Tim had made comments of trying to like auto set it or things like that, and like mesh with like bash profiles and things like that. So yes, wanted to find out if anyone had questions on that. Now
So-
how the Blink is to get updated together.
So let's just give a little context here. So right now in CircuitPython, to get stuff from settings.toml, you call os.getenv. And in regular Python, in CPython, if you call os.getenv, you get environment variables from the shell. So one thing to do is just tell people very explicitly and put it in learn guides, here's how to set environment variables in the shell. And people can just do that. The other thing, I'm not sure I would want it always to get things from settings.toml because people are familiar with environment variables, and but you could imagine that we might add, for instance, from Blinka import getenv, and we implement a special getenv that looks in settings.toml instead of looking in the environment. So if you don't use this thing, then you're going to get it from the environment. If you want to use settings.toml, then you have to add one line of code in the imports, and otherwise you'll never even see the use of the TOML library. I mean, there's a version issue here, but how does that sound to be the simplest? I mean, I'd actually kind of direct people toward using the environment variables, but If they just want to copy their settings.toml, that's easy too, and maybe that should be just as easy.
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good to me. I hadn't considered a separate getenv that kind of does this behavior for us. That would solve it pretty well in my mind. I do think environment variables, I mean, they're easy for me to use as daily driver on Linux for a while now. But the thing that kind of makes me lean away from that is how we do it in the learn guides and stuff, at least, is because the easiest way to add them, they are temporary. So if you just run export whatever equals whatever, then you get it and it works now, but it doesn't work when you come back to it tomorrow if you reboot or whatever. So then we start getting into like, okay, well, you can go to your bash RC file or one of your other things that runs automatically and you can add it there and it will run, which is fine, but also just feels like an alternative to settings toml. In my mind, it would make sense if the instructions for both the microcontroller and the Pi, when they're running essentially the same example, were effectively the same. Like put your stuff inside settings toml, which is basically what we did with CircuitPython. All of our instructions today for Blinka, when they use something like that, they'll say put your AIO key or whatever it is, put it in CircuitPython, and they show the format that it should be in and everything. And so those are getting switched over to settings toml, which in my mind, it makes a lot of sense to have Raspberry Pi just reuse all of that stuff so that we already have the exact syntax and everything there that they need to store it in. And we don't have to try and write out anything about like bash RC or anything that's kind of specific to Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, maybe I'm leading toward what you're saying. Yeah, and I think we could also, if this from Blinka import getenv thing, that could be in a try except block, and so if it doesn't work, then you just import from OS import getenv. So the same script could work on Blinka.
Oh, both ways, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a little extra code, or it's commented out. I don't know.
I'll also add real quick that Blinka already has a patch system that updates time. So in theory, we could update OS. We could update that to grab all the environment variables, add settings toml, so they're just both merged all the time.
Aha.
You're saying you could update os.getenv?
Yeah, because we already replaced time. So if we replace time the same way, we could replace OS with a different getenv that just merges the current OS environment with what's in settings.toml and just literally puts them together. And that way it works either way. So if you set it in the env, it works. And if you add a settings toml, it works. And the user never has to do anything because it just always works the same way.
That sounds really interesting.
I don't think you have to override getenv actually. I think you can mutate the environment dictionary directly.
Got you.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, so in theory, you could just put it into OS dots. So in that same patch system, you could update.
Or just when Blinka starts, it tries to read settings.toml. If it's there, it merges it in before it runs any other code.
Right.
So just throw a minor spanner in the works. I'm not sure that it matters, but I'll just throw it out there anyway. As a Windows user, I forget I'm not really a Blinka normal person. I'm a Windows guy. I was going through the mini MQTT CPython examples and basically thinking, all right, yeah, cool, going to have to update for OS getenv. What's the story there? I don't know. I technically might still be using Blinka just without realizing, because in reality I'm importing a CircuitPython thing which depends on Blinka potentially, etc., etc. So, work the same?
I think it will.
Yeah.
I think the way we're discussing it, it would ultimately work the same because in your case, it would take from settings.toml. So if
it's mutable, we can mess with it.
Yeah, because you can still mutate getenv, right? So in the underscore in the dunder init.py file for Blinka, it would do this.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't. It's not even a patch system. It's just something that happens in the init.
And the only place that would be left for secrets would be like portal base that would just have that as a last fallback or something.
I mean, maybe we should print a warning if there are conflicting settings.
Because that's the other thing. I'd quite like my environment variables to maybe override my settings top.
Yeah.
But actually, I don't know. Maybe it's the other way around, conflicting.
That's what
Like,
.env does that. It says if your environment already has something, then it doesn't override it. Like .env was the original inspiration for this. And
Yeah,
we
but
just
there
had
is no
to
.env on Windows, right?
I'm
So
pretty ignorant in
yeah, I mean Windows has environment variables, but it doesn't have. They're set in a different way. So anyway, so I think we have some ideas here. Yeah, I mean maybe it's worth opening an issue in Blinka about this, or even make a draft PR or something.
Yeah, I can make a draft PR that and try to see if I can import that in. I'll make the assumption that we're using 3.9 in Blinka, so it'll add the other library as well, so it works. And yeah, I'll start there. And
Okay.
Tim, you can figure out if the other things are mergeable with what's there now, and we can update them after the fact, or if we want to hold off to those, and we can take that question offline.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. Any other comments on this issue? All right. If not, we'll go on and wrap up the meeting. Thanks, everybody. Those are really interesting discussions we had here, and a lot of interesting things are happening. The next meeting will be next Monday, Monday, March 10th, 2025. At 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern, 11 a.m. U.S. Pacific time. So get your notes in for next week in the next meeting's notes doc. Thank you, everybody. And I'll stop recording now.